Hello, and welcome back to What's Your History, the podcast that covers all areas of history, heritage, and archaeology, no matter how big or how small, how well known or how niche. Today's guest was Caitlin Scutt, and she was speaking to me about prehistoric art, mostly talking about Creswell crags. And I hope you enjoyed this episode just as much as I did, because she definitely 100% has a passion for this subject, and it shows. So enjoy. I'm with my friend Caitlin, and she's going to be talking to us about prehistory. I think mostly specifically, we're going to be talking about prehistorical art.
Yes, that's kind of my focus, but all of prehistory is what I'm here for.
Wonderful. So what is it about this period that made you go, yep, that's the period I want to go into?
There's one of those weird questions where the actual answer is very silly. Whenever someone says, why do you go and do the degree and then the career path that you did? My answer is a children's book series that I read when I was quite young, that was set in the Mesolithic or the Stone Age. And it's just one of those things that I read and was instantly like, this is what I want.
All right. What was the book series?
The series is called Chronicles of Ancient Darkness. The first one is called Wolf Brother. It's like there's fantasy element and there's talking to animals and things, but it's also just a really well researched, like even reading it now after my degree, really well researched and well written book about the Stone Age.
That's actually really good. And I suppose that's definitely a good way of getting kids interested in history as well. Because more often than not, people tend to be interested in knights and the medieval era and Vikings. They're all the rage at the moment as well. So the fact that you're interested in prehistory, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think it is one of those ones where I obviously had my faves, and I still do. I like all of history, and I still like, the knights and the politics and the kings and queens. But that specific book series just stuck with me. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to do for uni, I was originally thinking, history or ancient history. And then I kept on going to look at degrees, maybe talking about the Greeks and the Romans. And I'd be being like, I want to go further back. How much further back can I go?
Wonderful. And how far back can we go in England? Or Britain, should we say?
That's a good question. There's a lot of evidence for pieces of habitation all the way through from before the Ice Age, and then the Ice Age, not so much. But then definitely post-Ice Age when we start to get what looks like permanent habitation in England. And there was also, at the time, it was connected to mainland Europe. So people could be travelling between it a lot easier than obviously they can now, or even as soon as they had to make boats, it became a lot harder to travel.
Wonderful. And you, not that the listeners are going to know this, but you have a tattoo of a stag, is it, on your arm?
I do, yes.
It's very of the prehistory style.
Yes.
Is it from anywhere in particular?
Yeah, so this is, again, I'm showing off, you can't see it. This is a stag from a site in France, and I apologise that I'm going to butcher the name. I should know it, seeing as I have a tattoo from it. It's called Les Combarelles, or something along those lines. It's a Palaeolithic, so the early Stone Age cave art site. And it was one that I just saw, and again, just instantly was like, this guy. Because it's just a stag and he's sticking out his tongue.
Wonderful. So the wonderful thing about the prehistory is, I think when people learn about prehistory, you don't tend to learn about prehistory as such. I think it's more, we learn about evolution and we learn about things like Lucy and stuff like that, which is all good. But then we kind of skip over the prehistory bit and we go from that to, hey, we had Iron Age people in England, or Britain, should I say. Is there anywhere in particular where we can see that sort of stuff, like the period that you're focusing on?
Yeah, it's a really, you're right, weird period, because everyone's focused on, before the Neanderthals and everything that came before, and then as soon as we get farming and Iron Age and the Bronze Age and everything, you get a lot more evidence. But that thing in between is, what evidence we find is very much that when you're just looking at them, it looks like some rocks. And they're really, really interesting rocks, but they are just some rocks. So yeah, it is difficult to find kind of sites specifically dedicated to it. My favourite one that I knew was going to come up today is Creswell Crags in Derbyshire, right on the border of Derbyshire and Nottingham. That's a great museum, and it has the only cave art in Britain.
What, as in like prehistory cave art, or just cave art in general?
Prehistorical cave art, specifically like Paleolithic cave art. It's very early. this is off the top of my head, this could be wrong, but I think it's about 16,000 years old. So pre-Mesolithic, this is when very much people were just living in caves, hunting, stone tools, and there's a lot of that kind of art in Europe, in France and Spain especially. That's where my tattoo's from. But in Britain, we just don't see it at all, other than this one cave that gives hope that there is others in the country we just haven't found yet, or at least there used to be, because it shows that those people were here and they were making art, and that's just really exciting.
Yeah, that is really cool that we get to see that. We get to see a little glimpse of what civilization might have been at that time. So just for that, just in case our listeners don't know, what do you mean when you say Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic?
Yeah, again, this is one of those things that as an archaeologist, I'm like, oh, the middle Paleolithic, and then I'm aware that that's not something that most people are taught or know about. So Paleolithic is the old Stone Age. So lithic is like Stone Age. But we commonly split up the Stone Age into 3 different sections. So Paleolithic is the old Stone Age that goes right from 3 million years ago, which is the like very earliest hominin or Homo species, all the way up to about 30,000 years ago, when we get human, or we're fully human Homo sapiens by then. The Mesolithic is in the middle. That's the middle Stone Age, and that's kind of like domestication of dogs, hunting with bows, that kind of thing, but still stone tools. And then the Neolithic is the new Stone Age, and that's when it's still stone tools, but the beginning of farming and agriculture, and leading into eventually the Bronze Age and on from there.
And aside from this book series you read as a kid, what is it about the Paleolithic that you went, yes, this is interesting, sod all the other periods, this is the period I like?
Forget about all those things with fancy metal and farming and everything. I want their stones. I don't know. It's a good question. And a part of it is the fact that the Paleolithic is one of those time periods that everywhere in the world experienced. There was a time where every single part of the world had the Stone Age, when people were living with stone tools and they were just living to survive. They were hunting, they were gathering, they knew the world and the environment, everything so much better than we ever could, because that was their life. That was all they knew, and they were just a part of the world. They weren't very, like, nowadays we're very separate from the world. You know, there's humans and then there's nature. But they were very much just another species back then who were hunting to survive, being hunted by other things that were trying to survive. And I think that's such an interesting time period as well, because it lasted for so long. You know, way over half of the time that we've been a species was during the Paleolithic. So it lasted for so long, and for the most part, from the outside, it looks like not much change, but there were a lot of changes during that time. So yeah, that's a very rambly answer of just saying I think it's so interesting that they were humans just like us, but living in such a different world to us.
Yeah. No, I get that. I'm just trying to prevent you from saying I like the period because it's cool.
Yeah, well, also that. I find it cool. The sharp rocks and the digging sticks and everything. Give me more of that.
I mean, as a period overall, it is very interesting. Like you said, like, it seems to us that little has changed, but things did change. Like, people suddenly went, actually, that stone's better than that stone. And, oh, this thing, wow, it makes music. And, oh, God, if we cook this thing, wow, it tastes better than when it's raw. You know, it is a lot of things that we, I suppose, now take for granted.
Yeah.
And it was a learning stage. So everything that they were doing. And I think when you were saying about the connection to nature, I think that's the one sad thing. And that probably doesn't help with industrialization and stuff, the fact that we don't even see the stars no more, due to the fact that we have light pollution.
Yeah.
Whereas even as far back as, well, even in medieval and Viking era sort of thing, they still connected to nature. They knew when was the best time to get up and go to bed, and they would use the stars and they would use the sun. And yeah, we've lost all that now. But that's mostly to do with industrialization. It
was something we really take for granted as well, that we have clocks, standardized time. But that's, again, a very, very recent thing. And, 300 years ago, that wasn't enough that people were like basing their day based off the clocks. It was based off nature again. So it is something that's just has very recently we've kind of gone away from. but all the way back to 3 million years ago when we were just another species, we were living the same way. So, yeah.
So when you focus on the Paleolithic, are you mostly focusing on Homo sapiens? When I say Homo sapiens, I mean humans, that's us, or do you focus on Neanderthals, or do you focus on both?
I have a not so secret soft spot for Neanderthals. I love them. I want to fully study them. I don't. I mainly focus on Homo sapiens and the I was going to say the more modern. It's still 300,000 years ago, but yeah, the later end of the Paleolithic where it is just Homo sapiens. I did in university do a whole module on human evolution. I find it really, really interesting, but it's kind of not what I've focused on in general.
When you went to study this, where is it you went to study prehistory? Because when I was studying archaeology, prehistory was one of the topics you just had to learn in your first year. But by the sounds of it, you what specialised?
Yeah, so like I say, when I was first looking for degrees, I was looking at ancient history because I thought I want to go back, and that was all very much Greek and Roman, that kind of ancient history. And I was like, no, further back. So I ended up just doing archaeology, and in first year, like you were saying, it was very much we did a bit of all time periods to kind of give everyone an overview of what there is in each of those time periods. But from then on, we could specialize and choose modules, and I from the very start went down the I want to do as far back as possible route. So I did human evolution. I did a module focusing on the Mesolithic, and I specifically looked at kind of gender and family relationships in the Mesolithic. And then my dissertation was on Paleolithic cave art specifically. So as soon as I was able to specialize, I really did.
And what did you learn in regards to the gender side? Because that sounds really interesting.
That's one of those things that is very hard to get information on because obviously there's no writing. There's especially in Mesolithic art and Paleolithic, very few depictions of humans. It's almost all animals or more kind of symbols. So it's something that's very hard to say anything for definite. The gender in the Mesolithic specifically, I was looking at how it's depicted today. And in all artwork or depictions of the Mesolithic, it's very much gendered as we would today, as in the men are out being big and strong and hunting, while the women are sat around the campfire looking after children.
But there's not wrong with that because if you look at actual tribal people that still do that sort of thing today, they kind of have that divide anyway. Is that not the case?
Not necessarily. For the most part, especially as we think the Mesolithic and looking at the kind of group size as we imagine for them, it would be very difficult for them to split roles that completely because there just weren't enough. Everyone had to do a bit of everything and everyone was contributing. Even the children were contributing in a lot of ways. There's also what skeletal evidence we do have shows that skeletons that we have identified as probably being female are still very muscular in ways that might relate to pulling a bow or something like that. So yeah, it's nothing we can say for certain. There's also different views of gender will likely very different, and that's something we do see in hunter-gatherer societies today. Is that they view gender in different ways. It's quite often a third gender, or as we would say, like gender fluid or trans people do quite often show up in the archaeological record, although they weren't named that in as many words. So yeah, it's one of those things you're never going to be able to say for certain, but it's really interesting to think about what evidence we do have and then think about how it's portrayed and the differences between those two things.
Yeah, I really love that as well because I know there's been lots of controversy and people are fighting over this and people are fighting over that, saying this is wrong, this is right, that's just whatever. But at the end of the day, our society today is just one social construct that only has really come onto the scene for the last 1,000, maybe 2,000 years at a push.
Yeah.
Really, of like how we act, believe, and think about stuff. So the fact that you're going further back and going, actually, people haven't done what we do now. So what we claim to be normal, well, it isn't because humans are not normal. We never have been.
Yeah, and it's all about the culture, the society, the situation you grew up in or that you're taught as a child completely influences all of that. It's entirely cultural, the way we think about all these things. And so there's no way of knowing how people, even despite the fact we have a lot more evidence for it, even 100, 200, 1,000 years ago really thought about that, never mind 300,000 years ago.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. It's just interesting the concept of humans. Like the one thing we can definitely say for certain is that we have all fought and failed and just wanted to survive. That's basically the long shot of it. Is our main purpose on Earth is to survive, whether that's through fighting the big bad or reproducing or sussing out what's the best thing to eat. Ultimately, it's survival. That's our main thing that we can genuinely say 100% we connect to our ancestors. All the rest of it, it's just fluff that we've all created. And I find that really both, I don't know, I find it quite nice, but also slightly frustrating because of how society is today. But it is nice that it doesn't matter how far back you look, we still have that one definite connection, which is we've always wanted to survive in some way.
I mean, you also say that, and this brings me back to my first love, which is Paleolithic cave art.
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of the other things that really makes us human is that want to create. Because once survival's out of the way, in every single culture, through every, you can go back as far as you like. There's art and there's creation, and there's so many creations we won't hear about. So there's singing, there's dancing, there's storytelling, none of which survives in the record. But of course they were doing that. And the art, the physical art is the only part of that we see. But you can go back. There's evidence of the Neanderthals making art, which is a whole separate thing that I could go off on. But
go ahead. That's what we're here for.
Yeah. It's one of those things that humanity, as soon as we've got the bare minimum out of the way of we surviving, the next thing we do is start creating. And that's just one of those things that always makes me emotional to think about, is that, that art is just like something we would make today because they were just people like we are today.
Yeah. And that's, again, really lovely. Just shows our connection, that we're not so different from our ancestors.
Yeah.
The only things that are different is, like our thoughts, our belief systems and stuff. They're all the things that are different. But the fundamental core of being human, we're exactly the same as they were.
Yeah.
Like if we've travelled back in time to be able to see them, we'd be able to connect.
Yeah.
Not necessarily through words, because obviously language has changed and evolved over time as well. But we'd be able to connect by going, hey, I've drawn this. Oh, you've drawn something as well. And
that's put your hand against a cave wall and pressing some paint onto it. It's just the same as 4-year-olds in preschool putting paint in their hand and pressing onto a piece of paper. Like, it's one of those things that's just, like you say, kind of goes beyond just speech. It's just that connection of we're all human, to get all philosophical about it.
That's the beautiful thing about it, though.
Yeah.
So if you were going to recommend people who might be slightly interested in this period but don't fully know where to go, what places would you recommend them to get started in being able to maybe see this world, if you can think of anything at the top of your head?
Well, the big one, and this is, I haven't gone, I wish I could, is just the painted caves in France, and southern France and kind of northern Spain, around like the Dordogne area. If you know anything about cave art, you probably know about like Lascaux or Altamira. They're the really big, like famous, absolutely gorgeous caves full of this really well-kept art. It's all painted, there's coloured bulls. I think both of them you can't actually go in physically anymore, just the preservation, but they have excellent reproductions of them at the site, so you can kind of get a feel of where these people were living when they were making this art. I would love to go. I highly recommend anyone who has the chance, please go and look at this art in my stead.
And come back and let her know all about it.
Yes. Even better, sponsor me to go. That would be great.
So, you've already mentioned Creswell as a place that if you can't go to France and you want to stay in the UK, then Creswell's probably the best place to go.
Yes.
If you were to try and sell this period to somebody who say, because like we said as well, like whenever people go for archaeology, the vast majority of people go for medieval. Not gonna lie, we work with a lot of medievalists.
Yes.
So yeah, a lot of people tend to go to medieval stuff if they want to do archaeology. But if you were to like sell this period, what would you say to people for them to go and do this?
I mean, it's a hard sell, I won't lie, because even you go into a museum and you see the shiny gold jewelry and the cool ornate swords and armor, and you're drawn to that, and not the napped flint in the corner. But I promise you, it's really interesting. Okay, you can see, like we were saying, even though it's such a long time period and in a lot of ways stays the same, just the smallest changes you can see how they evolve over time and how that leads to one thing to the next to the next, and how eventually all those little changes add up to lead us to our shiny jewelry and armor several thousand years later. It's really, I mean, quite literally the start of Homo sapiens, but also it is just the start of where you can begin to see, like, yeah, that person was just like me. If I was living in that time period, if they were living here, maybe we could be friends. We're just, again, to go back to this thing of, it's just people. And it always has been from hundreds of thousands of years ago.
Yeah. So one of the things, one of the places that I know of, I mean, it's more Mesolithic rather than Paleolithic, that people can see is at the Yorkshire Museum. They have a Mesolithic exhibition there at the moment called Star. Do you know of any other museums or something that people might be able to go to in order to see really nice Paleolithic, Mesolithic, maybe even early Neolithic stuff?
Again, Creswell Crags, along with the caves themselves, has a really good museum. They have some portable art there that was found at the site. So it's a small piece of bone with kind of an engraving of a deer on it. So their museum, along with the caves themselves, are really worth seeing. Like you say, Star Car at the Yorkshire Museum is really great. It's a local Yorkshire site. Some of that is also, of course, the British Museum in London. They have a really good kind of Stone Age and especially Mesolithic collection there. For going more Neolithic, you're looking at kind of places. I know there's one in Cumbria somewhere where or the kind of mines were that the people were mining for some really ornate axe heads. We see these green slate axes that were more Neolithic period. We found like the mines where they were mining out there and the start of really industry in this country, or on that kind of scale of industry. I can't remember exactly where, but yeah, somewhere in Cumbria, I know there's a museum focused on that. Trying to think of any others. I need to go to more museums. That's what I'm realizing.
Well, the things I'm thinking of when it comes to if you want to see Neolithic, which as we've established is New Stone Age, is probably going to see Stonehenge.
Yeah,
because for some reason the Neolithic people really liked putting their stones up.
Yeah, big rocks piled on top of each other was kind of the Neolithic way of doing things.
Or if you wanted to, you could also probably go up to the Orkney Islands because they've got Skara Brae and Maes Howe and all that sort of stuff as well. That's all Neolithic.
Yeah, you definitely get more from the Neolithic because that's when people start to really settle down. So when farming begins, you want to stay with your crops year round. You're not moving around following the deer anymore. So that's when we begin to see more permanent houses like Skara Brae, like you say, and also more permanent I've forgotten the word, kind of monuments or gathering places like we imagine Stonehenge probably was.
Yeah. Well, that's really, really cool. It's a bit of a shame that you can't see earlier stuff as much, at least. I think, yeah, as the places that we just pointed out. But yeah, well, thank you for sharing your passion.
Yeah, I mean, always happy to talk about it.
Yeah, that's fine. That's what we're here for. We want to learn all the stuff as to why it's so cool.
Yeah, more people should know about the Paleolithic. Join me in this. Look at all the cool art. It's really pretty.
So if anybody listening to this actually wanted to maybe study this, where would you recommend for them to go and study the Paleolithic?
It would be the kind of thing you'd kind of have to do archaeology for, because there is no forms of writing at all. We are really just looking at the archaeological evidence entirely. There's a lot of great resources out there in terms of kind of books and less so TV shows, or documentaries or anything. Although there are a couple on Netflix that specifically focus on human evolution that are worth keeping an eye on. But yeah, just keep an eye on your local archaeology. It's also the kind of thing where, although a lot of museums don't have specific collections based on it, because the Paleolithic was such a long period of time, a lot of museums do have collections of flint that they've found. Although they might not be on display, it's worth asking your local museum, can I come look at your collection of flint? And I'm extremely sure they'd be so happy to show you that, because no one wants to see it, but I do. And more people should.
And so if you're doing it from an archaeological standpoint, how can you actually tell the difference between this stone and finding out what period it's from?
This is one of those things that I've done lectures about it, I've studied it. Could I do it with no book in front of me? Probably not. Flint knapping itself, you can kind of notice it leaves a lot of marks in the rocks. You have to look very carefully and know what you're looking for, but you can notice when something's been napped or that's kind of like hitting a larger piece of flint to get flakes off that can then be used as tools. Specifically, aging it is a lot more difficult because you're kind of looking at how finely made the tools are, their size, that kind of thing. So that's a lot easier if you have a lot of books and a lot of experience and probably a professional next to you. It's the kind of thing you can do, or at least give it a very good shot by looking up some resource online. But yeah, I wouldn't be confident doing it myself without all those things.
That's fair. And what sort of things do we actually find from the Paleolithic, aside from the wonderful artwork that you've already mentioned? What other things have we actually found that we've gone, yeah, this is from this period?
So like I say, flint is the common one because it lasts really, really well. They were using it for a lot of things. It's a great rock, it's sharp, it's hard wearing. So for knives, scrapers, axes, whatever you need it for, they used flint a lot. Also a lot of other rocks and fire starters or things like pyrites that we use to start fires. We also, of course, get a lot of skeletons and a lot of bones and human remains from the Paleolithic. It's a period where inhumations or kind of graves and burials were very different. We don't see a lot of standardization across, especially from the Paleolithic to the Mesolithic, and then the Neolithic is completely different all across all of them. But we do get human remains from the Paleolithic, and another thing that's very exciting, the start of what looks like burial goods. And if you're burying someone with something, that suggests you believe there's some kind of afterlife, that they need that thing in. So that leads on to ideas of what these people believed, or greater power or higher powers, or why they were doing that, which is a whole nother extremely interesting question that we'll never really get answers for, but it's fun to think about. So yeah, it's mainly tools, a lot of bones, animal remains as well, especially in camp. So what they were eating is what we can study there. What they were eating, how they were eating it, how they were hunting it. So a lot to do with how they were living through what they were hunting, basically, and what we find from that. And the Paleolithic, less so, but more going onwards, is the remains of shelters as well. So it seems like people moving around the landscape a lot, but we can find kind of small camps that they maybe return to year after year, or cave sites that they used a lot, like Creswell Crags again. So yeah, basically just signs of everyday life is what we find most often, because that's what people use most often.
That's really cool. And obviously, as it's a different period, we're seeing different things to what you see later on in regards to like butchery marks and stuff on food and what have you. So that's really cool. Well, thank you so much for talking to us about the Paleolithic today.
Yes, thank you for having me. Sorry for rambling off about the Paleolithic.
Well, that was the whole point. It's fine. So if you want anybody to be able to find you, where would be the best places for people to find some of your, like, your work, your research, or anything like that?
If you're extremely interested, you can always email me. That would be caitlin.scutt@gmail.com. If you have any further questions, I can't promise I can answer them, but I will promise to ramble at you about them. So
wonderful stuff. I will definitely put that down in the description. So if anybody does have any questions that they want to ask Caitlin, then they're more than welcome to email her. Well, thank you so much again for this.
Yes, thank you for having me.
It's all right, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye. Thank you, Caitlin, for coming onto this podcast, and thank you to all my guests I've had for this season. Season 3 has now come to an end, but do stay tuned for Season 4 that'll be coming out again next year. Again, I would like to say a huge thank you to all my guests I have had this year and in previous years. And if you'd be interested in coming onto this podcast, do feel free to either send me a comment down below or message me at my Instagram account, which is Book and Trowel. Hope to hear from you soon.